Hi, and welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I'm going to talk about all of the books that I purchased in the month of October. So I had another really good, big, massive book haul. And the first thing that I'm going to talk about are 3 special edition books that I purchased. So the first special edition that I purchased is this brand new Lord of the Rings illustrated edition. Lord of the Rings is my #1 favorite all-time book. This edition, when I saw it, I went, I have to have it. So first off, you have an amazing cover. And this section right here, this is actually cut out of this dust jacket. This eye is actually on the cover itself. Secondly, you've got sprayed edges, and then you have stenciled edges. This is amazing. It is so gorgeous. Now the papers themselves, they are this beautiful, beautiful, thin, wispy, I don't know the terms. It's absolutely gorgeous. Absolutely gorgeous. And I think I got an illustration right over here. These illustrations, they're not just any illustrations. They are Tolkien's illustrations themselves. And of course this one's taken. Okay. It's embedded in it. I have a map just fell out. There's 2 maps. I have a book with all of his illustrations, but this book puts them all in it. To show you the book naked without its cover. So here we have that eye, and then you have an absolutely gorgeous spine. It's probably one of the most beautiful books I own. These are the Illumicrate special editions of Raybearer and Redemptor. I mean, the design speaks for itself. They're absolutely gorgeous. They both have sprayed edges. The covers themselves look absolutely amazing without the dust jacket. I mean, these are just gorgeous, beautiful books. The next category that I have are the next in my set of Harry Potter books. First off, it's not actually a book that I purchased. My cousin is actually as big of a Harry Potter fan as I am, and he went to some thrift sale and saw this book that I mentioned in my wrap-up and thought of me and purchased it for me. I love it. The next book that I got, it completes my collection of paperback American versions of the Harry Potter books. This is Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. This Goblet of Fire completes my American set of hardcovers. So now the American sets, both the hardcover and softcover, are complete. Unlike the other one, this one has a dust jacket. This book is a duplicate. On the description on Thrift Books, it was supposed to be the 7th in the British edition, the Bloomsbury edition, but clearly they sent me this one. So this one's going to my classroom library. And then I have 4 Bloomsbury editions. Now they were all supposed to be hardcover. This one is softcover. I hadn't started collecting the Bloomsbury in softcover, so now I have 4 with another one in Bloomsbury in the hardcover, 1 in softcover, so working on finishing collecting that next. The next Mina Lima illustrated edition has come out, and Chamber of Secrets. You can see a whole bunch of different page throughs on channels already. I absolutely love Mina Lima's designs. They are phenomenal. They're so well done, and they're just absolutely gorgeous. This one I actually pre-ordered, so I got it on the day that it released. My last 2 Harry Potter books are what I call art books. The Film Wizardry, which tells all about the filming. I have a ton, but this thing is just chock full, and it has paper replicas in it. And the last of those is the Case of Beasts. So this is very similar to Film Wizardry of Harry Potter, only this is for Fantastic Beasts and where to find them. In the next section, I have the books that I purchased in Spanish. So first of those, I have Se Fueron a la Izquierda. This is the newest book from Monica Hess. I have read her book The Girl in the Blue Coat in English and in Spanish, and absolutely love it. It is amazing. I have not yet read this book, so I will also be purchasing the English version. She's one of those must-buy auto buys for me, but I got the Spanish version because I know it'll be amazing. I also have A Cinco Pies de Ti, which is 5 Feet from You. I've read it in English. It was an average, slightly above average book in English for me, but again, I want to expand my Spanish collection in my classroom library so that all of my students can read. And then this one just super intrigued me because graphic novel in Spanish, and it's Pride and Prejudice, one of my all-time favorite stories ever. So this is clearly a lot shorter. I was expecting more. So probably a lot has been cut out, but I'm excited to see how this was adapted and put into illustrated form. The next few books don't go in any particular order, but they are all generally fiction. I have here a box set of all of Roald Dahl's books. Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, Charlie and the Glass Elevator, James and the Giant Peach, the BFG, the Witches, Matilda, all the classics. I have read all of them before. Roald Dahl is just a very imaginative children's author, and I thought it would be phenomenal to have the entire set. Next, I have a couple of adult fiction. This Girl in Translation is a really intriguing look at what it is like, the immigrant experience. This girl is exceptional. She's super smart, super innovative. She's an entrepreneur, but she has to have this dual life. She's an exceptional student by day, but a sweatshop worker by night. And this story tells of how she navigates between those two. In this book, The Violets of March, Emily Wilson used to have it all. She was on top of the world, had everything she could ever think of. And then 10 years later, she's kind of lost it all. And she's searching for herself. Her great aunt invites her to stay on this island, and she discovers a journal. And through this journal, she explores both the history of this woman in the journal and what it means to have once had everything and then lost it again. It's a story that's been done before, but Sarah Jiao does it beautifully in this book. Most of the rest of the books I have in the book are series, young adult series, but before I get to that, I have a few either standalones or first books in the series. I have The Cruel Prince by Holly Black. In this book, the main character is Jude. When she is 7, she is stolen away after her parents are murdered. She and her sister, her twin sister and her half sister are stolen away to fairyland, and her parents are actually murdered by her half sister's father, a fae, the type of fae I'm forgetting at the moment. And so they go and they live with the man who is both her half sister's father and Jude's parents' murderer. And through this, she is a fully human girl living in a fae world, so she has no magic. She's always looked down upon, and Holly Black does a phenomenal job in exploring all of these and creating a rather morally gray but likable and a character that you can root for in Jude. Next, I had Peter and the Starcatchers by Dave Barry and Ridley Pearson. I first discovered this book when I was looking for every book that Jim Dale had narrated. I absolutely love the audiobook narration for Harry Potter, which Jim Dale does the American version for, and he's also narrated these books. And I just love the whimsy and the reinterpretation of the story of Peter Pan and Neverland. It's just gorgeous. It's been so many years since I've read it, but I still look back on it fondly. Next, we have one that I actually haven't read, but it's from a must-buy author for me, and that is Jason Reynolds. His book, Long Way Down, is one of my all-time favorites. Long Way Down is phenomenal. He has a whole book. It's an elevator ride down. It's told in verse. This book, a little bit shorter, but it's a similar concept. It's telling the story of a neighborhood one block at a time. So it's look both ways, talking about a neighborhood, and it's 10 blocks, one block at a time, telling the story of the neighborhood, peeling back all of the layers. I cannot wait to get into this book because I know it's going to be amazing. Last of the Standalones is a book that was on this year's SCASL list. I absolutely loved it, fell in love with it, rated it 5 stars, put it on my wish list, now I have it. In Heartbreak Me, Jacqueline Woodson tells the story of these kids who are going to a sort of last chance, sort of a therapy group, where they're supposed to talk to each other, but for a while they don't. But then eventually they do start talking to each other and building a family, and it's both a heartbreaking and endearing story of found family. So next I have several young adult series. Most of them are really popular, so I won't spend too long talking about each of them. Most people know what these books are about. Now I do have that nice fancy box set of the original Percy Jackson series. When I went to buy the Heroes of Olympus series, I bought them off thrift books, so they're not a box set. So they do have broken spines, they do show a little bit of wear, but I have them. So I have the 4 I have here, and of course it's difficult to turn around, so I should have started the other way. But I have the 5 books of the Heroes of Olympus series. I do actually enjoy this more than the original Percy Jackson series because we get to meet more characters. Next, I have the Red Pyramid Chronicles, also by Rick Riordan. This tells the story of Sadie and Carter. They are twins, and it involves Egyptian gods. I would probably rank this series 3rd out of the 3 total series. I still really enjoy it because I love learning about and reading about the interactions with Egyptian mythology. The last of the popular young adult series that I have is the Scythe Trilogy. I have a fond place in my heart for Neil Shusterman, and that's because when I was first doing my practicum, training to be a teacher, the librarian got Neil Shusterman to come and give a talk to the students, and that's the first time that I ever found any of Neil Shusterman's books. And since then, his writing has just gotten even more and more phenomenal, and this series, it might be, the pinnacle for him. I don't know, I hope he has even more better out there, and I know that not grammatically correct, but I absolutely love the Scythe Trilogy. I think he explored some absolutely incredible thought-provoking questions through this, with the idea of the justification for killing and people's motives for it, and the nearly sentient AI with the cloud, with the thunderhead. So it's phenomenal. If you haven't read this series, you need to pick it up right now. Speaking of Neil Shusterman, the next series that I have, not quite as popular or well known, is one of his earlier series that I've read and loved, and that is the Everlost series. So the Everlost series, the main part of the series does have Everlost, Everwild, and Everfound. And so Neil Shusterman takes wild ideas and explores what that would mean and how that would play out. And in this, it's the idea of it's the in-between. So Everlost is the in-between life and death. And there's bad guys in there that are keeping these kids primarily from being able to pass on, from being able to move from life to death. Who's exploiting them. There is the idea of skinjacking, which is very exploitative, and Neil Shusterman explores what does that mean, how do they deal with it. It is a thrill of a ride and well worth the read. Next, I have a complete series by another author, and the first book in another series that by the same author that I also found my first year of teaching, basically training, not an actual teacher yet, and that is Emily Rhoda. And so the first book by Emily Rhoda that I ever read is Rowan of Rin. And so Rowan of Rin, this is a traditional fantasy story that I don't actually remember a lot about because I thought this was a different Emily Rhoda book, but still really good. The most recent Emily Rhoda books that I have read is the Three Doors trilogy. So you start off with the golden door, then you have the silver door. No, it's not the bronze door. It's the third door. So this series I read this year. It was a return to Emily Rhoda, who I had not read a lot of in a long time. And the way she explores this world, there's a lot going on that really digs into issues and how they're dealt with in these different places, and how all of these characters have to deal with, they live in this walled off city and no one ever goes through the wall, but now there are these creatures that are coming over the wall. They're getting over the wall and they're coming through and they're attacking by night and they're killing, and it's really bad. And so the head of the city says, hey, I'm gonna give out this reward if anyone is able to go through the wall and find out where are they coming from and how do we stop them. The main character, Rye, is the youngest of three sons. At the beginning, his older brother goes off in this book, and then his younger brother goes off. Middle brother goes off in this book, and now he's the only one left. And it's been years, and so he takes it upon himself to try to find them. And this series is his exploration. When I got to the end of the third book and everything was revealed and came together, blew my mind. Emily Rhoda did an amazing job tying all of this together, and Rye is such an adorable, believable, I loved Rye as a character. So the last YA series and the last bit of fiction that I have to talk about today is Scott Westerfeld's Steampunk Trilogy. So in this trilogy you have Leviathan, Behemoth, and Goliath. So it does bother me a little bit that I got these in paperback and this one in hardback, but I'll deal with it. This is the series that got me sort of into steampunk and thinking that I might really enjoy steampunk, because Scott Westerfeld, he did a really good job with this. I don't remember a lot of the details, but it is fairly stereotypical for steampunk. You've got two characters. You've got Alec, who is a prince, but he's unsatisfied with being a prince. And you've got Darren, who is a girl disguised as a boy working on a British steamship, and there's chaos ensuing and they have to team up together to prevent it. It is really good. I probably should have investigated a little bit more, refreshed my memory on these. I just know that I really enjoyed it when I first read them, so that's why I bought them. The last section of books that I have are my nonfiction books. I have a variety of books in here. The first two books that I have here are books that will be the next books that I tackle after I finish Courageous Conversations, and that is Sing a Rhythm, Dance a Blues. It talks about how to help and educate girls of color. So in that case, it's similar to Push Out, but it's not talking about the girls that have already been pushed out. It's talking about how to reach these girls before they get pushed out. Next I have Cultivating Genius, an equity framework for culturally and historically responsive literacy. So one of the big things for me, obviously I am a social studies teacher, but I also clearly love to read, and bridging those two gaps to help students build this ability to read and this framework to interpret the things coming at them. So I'm really excited to get into this one. I don't know when that will be, but it will be soon. Next I have a cookbook. Yes, a cookbook. But I love to run, and one of my favorite runners is Shalane Flanagan, and I have now all three of her cookbooks, her and her best friend Elise Kopecky. I've yet to make a single recipe, but I maybe will. I'm really excited about this because breakfast is my favorite meal, and that's what all of these are. So maybe someday in the future I'll make one of those superhero muffins that they have lots of recipes for in here. Then I have Freedom Walkers. I loved this so much. You saw this in my October wrap-up, I believe, and I loved it. Russell Friedman was a phenomenal author. I had to put it on my list. Now I own it. Then we have Ta-Nehisi Coates' Between the World and Me. In this book, Coates is writing a letter to his son, laying out a lot of the realities that black males face in America. And it was a very quick but powerful read for me. And I'm actually really intrigued to give it a reread, especially with this copy, because I bought this book secondhand through thriftbooks.com, and someone donated their annotated copy. So I did take out all of the sticky notes that were in there, but I left, obviously I couldn't take these out, I left the notes that were in there. So I'm intrigued to read this and get another person's perspective in it as I reread it. Because I have Ravensbrück. I read this book last year. All the books that deal with things like this and the next book that I'm going to talk about that are hard-hitting, they're the ugly parts of history. I want to read more. I want to learn more. They are hard to read, but they definitely need to be written about. And I knew next to nothing about Ravensbrück, which was a female-only concentration camp. The horrors that were inflicted on these women. This author does not shy away from talking about that, talking about the reality, talking about what they went through and documenting that. And this is very, very historiographically sound. Brief pause. I just realized I was thinking of the Nagasaki book that I talked about in last month's book haul. So I'm not going to talk about that now, but that was the book that I was thinking of. Next, I have Gut by Julia Enders. I'm fascinated by the human body and learning about what makes things tick, and everything behind our gastrointestinal system and everything that she talks about in here, absolutely fascinating. It's not, I mean, if you get squeamish about talking about like digestion, don't read this. But otherwise, it's fascinating and well worth a journey through the digestive tract. Next, we have Quackery, A Brief History of the Best and Worst Ways to Cure Everything. I misread the subtitle. A Brief History of the Worst Way to Cure Everything by Lydia King, MD, and Nate Peterson. Wow. I actually saw a student reading this book a few years ago and looked over their shoulder and read a few pages and thought, you know, I think I want to read this book. So I put it on my to-read list. I read it. I loved it. It's so well done. And the things that people thought would cure different diseases, yeah, no. And so, I mean, look at this illustration. Excellent book. I love the hardcovers that have the actual cover and don't have the dust jacket. It's my favorite style. Then we have Black Man in a White Coat. It is a memoir by Dr. Damian Tweedy, and it is powerful. He shares the experience of what it means to be a black man in a field dominated by white men and what he experienced as he went through and the disparities that he saw in the health outcomes, not only for him, but also for his patients, and why he felt motivated to work where he did. Then we have Alex Kershaw's The Few. It's about American pilots who went over before America entered World War II and served as volunteers in the RAF in a time where it was extremely risky to do so. This is a solid read, very engaging. Next, I have a book. I will admit I haven't read this yet, but I was listening to a podcast, and in that podcast, they were talking to the granddaughter of someone who actually discovered paperwork that revealed this. And their grandfather was part of Operation Nemesis, which, as someone who wrote their master's thesis on the Armenian genocide, I knew nothing about. I didn't realize anything about that. And I actually believed the story about the Armenian man who killed Talat Pasha, one of the former heads of the Young Turks in the Ottoman Empire. He had fled to Germany. He was getting protection from them despite the genocide that he had inflicted on the Armenians. The Germans knew all about it. I believe the story that was told at Talleyrand, the man's trial, that his whole family was murdered by the Turks and in front of him, and for revenge he happened to find himself in Germany and saw Talat Pasha and thought, I gotta get rid of him. I believed that story. I thought that was historical fact. It's not. There was a whole Operation Nemesis put together by survivors of the genocide. Now, Talleyrand, his whole family was murdered by the Turks as part of the genocide, but he was serving as a soldier on the front, so he wasn't there. He came home to find them all murdered. This podcast told about this woman who, after her grandfather died, went through his filing cabinet and found paperwork revealing everything about Operation Nemesis and the things that they did. And as soon as I heard about it, I'm like, I need to read this book. I need to find out all about it and learn even more. Talleyrand was part of this conspiracy. And the reason that these Armenians felt that they had to do this was because no one was doing anything. The end of the Paris Peace Conference ended with America doing nothing, being like, you went to Russia, so we're not going to help you. And Armenia's over there going, we went to Russia because we had a threat right here on our doorstep, and you wouldn't stop talking and help us. And so none of these men were being held accountable for their crimes. And so these Armenians took it on themselves to hold them accountable. And they weren't spies. They weren't like trained in this. I think this woman's grandfather was a dentist. Yeah, so it's fascinating. I cannot wait to dive into this book and talk all about it. Then we have The Warmth of Other Suns by Isabel Wilkerson. Wow, what a powerful book. This book talks about the Great Migration of African Americans and how they fled at different times and from different states, the South, and went to the North. And they did it in hopes of a better life. And she traces their story from what motivated them to flee, their journey, and then their experience in the North and how it wasn't actually all that much better. This is a very powerful book that I highly recommend. And lastly, I have a trilogy. I'm not going to hold them all up at the same time. I'm going to show them and then I'm going to talk briefly about them because they are big. So they are all about the Civil War. So I'm holding these up first because I love these new editions and I wanted them all to match. But then volume 1 came, so I got these from Amazon and then I got volume 1 from Thrift Books, so they don't match. But be that as it may, I actually listened to these on audiobook and they're like the textbook that you need on the Civil War. They're told in an engaging way. They tell basically all the details. And that wraps up my massive, massive book haul. I did have like 3 books in there that I haven't read yet, but I know will be really, really good. And all of the rest of the books are 5-star reads for me. Sometimes all-time favorites, amazing special editions. This was so much fun. I really hope you enjoy it as well. And join me down in the comments to talk about any of these books. If you have any other suggestions, if you have any other comments or ideas, I just would love to chat with you in the comments. See you in my next one.